Video is starting. Are we live? I think we're live. Yay. Okay. All right. I wanted to, and it's been on my heart for a minute, and my sister keeps going live, and then I'm like, I need to go live, and then life happens, and I haven't gone live, and I'm like, I need to go live. I like to talk about things because there are things that people need to talk about and people don't talk about, but if we talked about them more, we would all be a little better off. And I am a person who has just about zero shame. It took me a while to get to that point, but we're all human. We all experience things. I don't. It took me a while to kind of get to the point where I'm a kind of a judgment free zone in a way. Like I understand that we all come from different experiences, we all do different things, and we might be operating from a lot of pain, and our behaviors are not always things that we like, but we end up doing them because of what we've experienced in our life. And one of the biggest places where we get a little funky is in relationships, and I am 100% guilty of being a little bit funky when it comes to relationships and love and all the things. And I'm totally an open book in that I feel the more we talk about things, the more we express our feelings, the more we understand that other people are experiencing similar things or have gone through similar things. And if we share what we have learned from that situation, then it just helps everybody. So I have no shame in my game to talk about my life and how things are going and where I've been and where I'm coming from. So just an example to show you, like, many people, and by the way, oh my God, are you obsessed with these earrings? I'm obsessed with these earrings. I used to have like rainbow earrings and I loved them. But over time, they lost their color. I may have put them in the wash. I don't know, but they got really dingy. They used to be like so bright and just like these ones. And then then they lost their color, they lost their vibe, and I was so sad. And then I found these earrings, but they were in just one long chain. It was the pink, the yellow, and the blue, and just one chain. And then I hated that. So I edited them. I bought a couple different pairs and I put them all together instead of one big chain. And I'm just loving these earrings. I love my feather earrings. And this is one pair. I have another pair that's like pink and white and purple. But anyway, just had to brag on myself for editing my earrings, making them more my style, and just having super fun with it. And this was one of the things that is kind of new within the last 2 years, well, now 3 years at this point of my life. Is I used to dress how I thought people would better perceive me. I used to not allow myself to just express myself the way that I wanted. And I got into a much better place. Like I wear a lot of gold blingy jewelry. Usually I have a necklace on, but I went to the chiropractor, so I didn't have a necklace on today. But um, so many epic changes in my life within just the last few years, and even within my whole life, honestly, some epic changes. And one of the biggest changes has been relationships for me. So if you, some of you are new here, some of you have been around for a while. And so I just want to kind of recap a little bit about my life and my relationship situation and what's kind of been going on, so that, we don't talk enough about the things that are important. And when we begin to realize that other people have been through similar situations as us, it helps us to heal and learn and grow and do better and be better. And often things about relationships are kept quiet, are kept hidden, because we have this belief system that relationships need to be like this, I don't I don't even know how to explain it, but we relationships are the biggest place where our trauma comes out. So all of us have experienced trauma. There's no way that anyone has avoided it. I mean, trauma as simple as I was in school and the teacher told me I was stupid once. That's traumatic, right? And that can cause a belief system within our body that we now believe we are stupid. And these are things that happen to us when we're little. And we have no idea that the things that happen to us when we are little create programs within us that determine how we operate today. Okay. So I'm a person who experienced quite a bit of trauma in my life. I was raised by a father who had a lot of mental illnesses and did not. I mean, he took medication and stuff, but he didn't do a lot of legitimate work to be better. And so he was very controlling. He was very manipulative. He relied on me to be his therapist. So he would, sit down and tell me all of his problems. I remember being, right around like somewhere around 8, 7 years old, and he's talking to me about his sex life with my stepmother and their problems and their issues. So I've experienced quite a bit of trauma in my life, not only from my parents, but in other different avenues. And it all led to me not really knowing how to have a good, healthy relationship. As a child, I never witnessed what a good, healthy relationship looked like. I only saw my parents' relationship, which included my father, and he was, again, just he had a lot of issues within himself and within his relationships. So I never saw what a healthy, effective relationship looks like. And coming from my childhood as an adult, when I go into a relationship, any relationship that I had that was a little bit better than what I saw my parents have was amazing, even though it wasn't amazing, right? If my perception of, so I have a father who's controlling, manipulative, screaming and yelling, puts down his wife. Anything slightly less than that seems amazing, right? Like if this is normal to me, because this is what I've seen, this is what I've grown up with, anything just a little better than that seems really, really great. But it's not really, really great, right? Because that is not a kind of relationship that we want to be in, where someone is controlling, manipulating, screaming at you, putting you down all the time, always in a fight. I remember it was like every other weekend, my stepmother was packing her bags to leave because she was so angry at my father. And even my own parents, I saw a lot of screaming and yelling. I mean, he would just abuse her mentally and emotionally all the time. And this is what I witnessed growing up. And so anything less than that was normal. Anything, well, that was normal actually. So seeing a man operate like that, I thought, well, this is all men. I didn't know, these behaviors are unique to my father. I just thought this is a husband, this is a man, this is what they do. So when I get into a relationships, when I, am a teenager and as a young adult and even further, anything that was better than that was, and even just slightly better, was wonderful, because I was like, oh, well, it's not as bad as what I saw with my dad. And again, I didn't know it was bad. I knew I didn't like it. But on a scale of understanding good relationships to toxic relationships, I only seen toxic ones. Right? That's my whole experience, is toxic relationships. I never got to witness a loving, healthy relationship between any of my parents, because even my mother, she went on to another relationship, but she had so much abuse and trauma from my father that it carried into her next relationship. And they are so much better than what I have seen, and they're getting better continually, and it is a much more loving relationship than what I experienced. But I didn't get to see that or really experience that as a young person. So when I started dating and when I started, being attracted to people and wanting to have relationships with people, it was with similar type of men as my father, because that is what I knew, and it was programmed within me to want to cater to a man, take care of a man, and cater to his feelings, right? So my father is using me as his therapist as a young child, and this is how I've grown up to be and to function, that in order to have a man and to keep him happy, you have to be his therapist, you have to take care of his feelings, and everything has to be about him, and you get to, deny yourself and not care about yourself because it's all about the man. And then then we have the worldly trauma, so not even just the trauma from my own childhood, but then we have the worldly trauma of girls are princesses waiting for her hero, and a woman's most amazing thing is getting engaged and getting married and having a husband and being a wife, and that was the primary purpose of a woman, was to get married, to have a husband, to take care of the house and things like that. So, and then we really stress relationships. We so want love and connection, like even just simple things as physical touch. Like it should be normal that friends like cuddle each other, right? That we can sit on the couch with a movie and just cuddle each other. But we have made physical affection so weird within our society that you're only allowed to receive physical affection from your partner. And so we all rush to have a partner because that's our only way of really tapping into physical affection. I mean, we freak out when a famous person kisses their older child on the lips, and we're like, "Oh my God, like that's just nasty." And I'm like, in other countries they kiss each other all the time. Like, why have we've over sexualized like every form of any sort of intimacy between people, whether it's sexual or not? We've made it all sexual. So we have this belief system that in order to get any sort of physical attention or love from someone else, which is a completely normal and human thing to have, you must be in a relationship. And so relationships are super important. Being a wife, super important. Getting married, super important. Your whole value is determined about being a wife, having an amazing wedding. Like these are all the things that as I was growing up, this is what I was told is important, what needs to happen. And this determines my success in life, is having a relationship, having a beautiful wedding, getting married as soon as I can, and having a husband. And that would allow me to be successful as a woman within this world. And, we see this repeated on movies, romantic rom-coms. It's always the girl's got to find the guy. And if she doesn't find the guy when she's young enough, then her life is awful. Like, these are just the things that have been perpetuated within society. And so we get a lot of trauma from that. So you combine the trauma I had with my childhood of watching my father being controlling, manipulative, using me as his therapist, and then you add in the trauma of how important relationships are and that you need to be in relationship, and you've just created this, toxic little bomb of what I am. So I'm not going to go into too many details about my earlier relationships, but I will tell you that they were very toxic. There have been times, and in fact, as a teenager, most of my boyfriends ended up in jail for some reason or another, and or had a restraining order. I had a restraining order against them. So that was the level of relationships that I had as a teenager. So, relationships with men who were so toxic that it got to the point of needing to be in jail and or having restraining orders. And that's what I was attracting, because I wanted to take care of men, because that's what was programmed within me to do with my father. And then added in, relationships are so important. Okay, so there have been some pretty crazy times in my life with experiences with men, a lot of stalking personally and otherwise. I'll write a book one day about my earlier days, but I want to say also that I mostly want to talk about, within the last couple of years. So prior to 2020, so I actually was married when I was really young. I think I was 18 years old when I got engaged. And I would say he was actually a really nice guy. There wasn't, and a lot of craziness with him. He was a good guy. And ultimately we had different, I honestly don't remember too much of our marriage because I was so young. But I remember the desire to get married quickly. I remember I wanted an engagement as fast as I could. As soon as I could get married, I wanted to get married, because again, that was the belief system. And then I also was coming from a boarding school. So I was, because I was such a naughty girl with all those guys who ended up being in jail, I was sent to a boarding school in Montana. It was a religious boarding school. So then more trauma on top of that. And in that boarding school, they again pressed upon the idea that my job and role in life is to be a wife, to take care of a home, and that the most safest path for me would to settle down, get married, have a husband, rather than running wild, right? So that belief was instilled in me as well. So when I came home from boarding school, it was very, very shortly after that I was engaged with my first husband, and then we got married, and we just weren't clicking. We weren't, meant to be together. And our relationship was over after a year. From that point, I never really got into, I did have another like boyfriend that was a little more longer term, but I didn't date like other people date. And what I mean by that is there are people who are like, well, I had this boyfriend for like 2 years and he hung out with my family and friends and things like that. All of my relationships were kind of quiet and kind of secret and kind of on the down low. And I didn't really, it's very rare that I ever brought somebody home, you know what I'm saying? Like, or introduced them to my sisters or anything like that. So I didn't have a ton of relationships. And like I've never lived with a man unless I was married to them. And I know like I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying like I didn't experience what I've seen other people do with relationships where they have, long-term relationships. These people actually know this person and everyone knows you're together. Like if you look at my announcements on my Facebook, there's never been a time where I really announced a relationship unless I was getting married. So so I spent a lot of years being single. So between my first divorce to my second marriage, it was a big chunk of time because we got married in pretty '09 and that, or '08, '09, and that lasted for about a year. And then I didn't get married again until 2020. And any relationship in the middle was not something that was really spoken about or public or anything like that. So although I did have, so funny, the universe freaking hilarious with me. The one relationship that I did actually post about prior to getting married was I had met a man in North Carolina, and it was like so freaking magical. And I was going to be moving to North Carolina to go be out there. My sister had moved out there, and that's why I was out there, and I met him. And I was going to move out there, and I had talked about moving out there, but I never really shared too much about him. But I had posted a little bit like, there's a relationship. This is awesome, and I'm moving to North Carolina. Funny enough, his name was David. And then my second marriage was named David. And now my partner now is named David. I have had 3 Davids in a row. So that is of relationships that I have announced publicly, 3 Davids in a row. The universe is so funny. And this just honestly speaks to the power of manifestation that I was saying. So I believe in affirmations where you say a statement that may not be true right now, but that you want it to be true. And so you repeat it to yourself because ultimately the universe wants to give you what you want. But the universe isn't like, what do you want, Melissa? The universe goes, what does Melissa keep thinking about? And we'll give Melissa whatever she keeps thinking about. So I like to think thoughts and repeat those thoughts to myself as an affirmation over and over again so that those things can come into my life. So I was saying a lot of affirmations about relationships that included the name David. So it makes the sense to me that all of them were named David. It started with the first one. But anyway, and that relationship also was toxic towards the end. It was great in the middle, or it was great while it started, and then it ended rather abruptly on my end. I was not prepared for him to just one day cut it off and end it. And then it got a little crazy because I was like, how dare you just not talk to me anymore and just leave me hanging like this? And so I got a little aggressive. I did show up to his house in North Carolina, to his mom's porch, and be like, what the fuck is going on, yo? But anyway, and it was a little toxic, but of course, because of my history, right? Because of the trauma that I've experienced in my life, I really only had toxic relationships. I didn't know anything less than that. And the thing too about being raised with so much trauma is, when you're raised with a lot of trauma and you have a lot of trauma in your life, it causes you to want to seek another person who understands that trauma. So you basically attract another traumatized person, and then you begin to perpetuate your trauma with one another, cycle after cycle, because trauma wants to be seen and felt and heard and acknowledged. And so you literally attract a person who has similar trauma to you so that you guys can actually ping traumas off of each other back and forth. And it's an attempt for your trauma to try and solve itself, but it's one of the most backwards way of doing it. But so I always attracted men with similar levels of trauma to mine. Now, when the relationship with David number 1 ended, I was on a spiral for a little bit, and you can actually go back on my Facebook. I kind of, it was That was the year that I kind of reset everything, like major changes. So I had met him. So let me back up a little bit. I had adopted my daughter in November or October. I met him in December. My adopted daughter attempted suicide within a span of, she attempted suicide 3 times within a span of 4 months. So shortly after the adoption, we had multiple attempts of suicide, which just was just lots of craziness going on within our world. My job had asked me to, I had one of the best teaching positions I had ever had. And at December of the school year, so everything was happening right around the same time. In December, right before I had gone off to go North Carolina, where I had met that guy, they had told me that your job is, the empowerment teacher, but your coworker is not doing so great at his job in social studies, and we are going to fire him unless you're willing to trade positions with him. So it was either take on a more difficult, more work job, and or lose your friend and your peer. So I switched jobs with him so that he wouldn't, because they had threatened to fire him. I don't know if that was true or not, or if they're just trying to put the pressure on me. But that was scary. So what that meant for me though was now where I had a pretty easy job teaching, it went to and it was so great having an easy job with teaching, because I didn't have to prepare any lessons, I didn't have to plan anything. I was teaching like things like the 7 habits, and we already have curriculum on that. So then it went to preparing social studies curriculum for 3 grade levels, 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders. And then they wanted me to add in a lot of like reading and writing, a lot of language arts within the social studies. And there was no curriculum provided to me. I had to create everything myself. So that was happening. And then all of that was so much. All of it was just pounded on me so much. I met him in December, and that felt like a relief. And from December to March, we were dating. We would call each other every day. It was a wonderful relationship. I felt so loved. He was always so expressive about how he felt, and I just thought it was like the best thing ever, because like I said, anything less than controlling, manipulating, screaming and yelling all the time was absolutely wonderful. So for me, this was the most wonderful, because it was all just so much love, so much words of affirmation, that, how he felt about me, how beautiful he thought I was, how much he had a good time around me. And it was so instant, and it was just so magical. And I flew out to him a couple of different times. So I like flew out for Valentine's Day, and then I think I had gone once or twice, I think, to North Carolina, or I was maybe the second time I was scheduled to go out. That's when he ghosted me. Like he literally like a week before I was scheduled to fly out for spring break, I didn't hear anything from him. And it was such a drastic cutoff. I literally thought he was in a car accident. I was like, I gotta start making phone calls to hospitals, because I literally thought, like, there's no way. Someone was like, are you sure he didn't ghost you? I'm like, there's no way. Like, no way he would do that. I was like, look at our text message from just the night prior. Like, how would he suddenly just decide to ghost me? And that's actually exactly what he did. So it really threw me for a loop. And then that was the year also, again, there's so much going on with my adopted daughter, so much happening with my school environment, and I freaking lost it. And I had shingles down my back. I'm like 29 years old. I have shingles down my back. I have patches of plaque psoriasis all over my body, just little red marks. I have cradle cap on my face. So I have like patches of skin around my nose that are all flaky and red. My cortisol levels were through the roof. I had to start sucking on cotton balls so that doctors could test them, and peeing in a jug because my cortisol levels were crazy. So I decided to go to the Mayo Clinic and see. I was like, something must be systemically wrong here. So many different, I also had chronic yeast infections. I'm like, something is going on medically, and if I can go to the Mayo Clinic to get this taken care of, that would be great. And they ultimately diagnosed me with high functioning anxiety and gave me a meditation CD. And I was pissed at the time, because I didn't understand that all of these things were simply stress. Stress manifests itself in our bodies as, mental, as illnesses. And this is where most of our illnesses actually come from, is stress perpetuated in the body over and over and over again. If you're always running off of stress, fight or flight, and many people who are raised in trauma are constantly operating on fight or flight, the majority of all of your illnesses are stemming from that. And so when you begin to control your stress, when you begin to actually heal some of those traumatic wounds, your health improves quite a bit. And you can look up Dr. Joe Dispenza to learn more about that. But anyway, at the time, I didn't understand it. This was the first time, though, that someone had told me I had anxiety, and I never really understood what that was. And even just a few years ago, before I got in therapy, I still didn't quite understand that they told me I had high functioning anxiety. I didn't quite understand what that meant, because I had even said, there was a post about, I was traveling a lot for work, and I said I wish I could take my dog with me, and people said, oh, get an emotional support animal. And I was like, I don't think that I qualify for that. But once I actually filled out the paperwork for it, and you see the impact that Zoo has had on my life, I'm like, oh my God, did I ever need an emotional support animal? And absolutely, now I understand what anxiety is, and how. And I honestly, though, have healed a lot of my anxiety. So anyway, that relationship compounded with all the things that were happening in my personal life, and the shingles down my back, and the crazy job situation. That was the year I was just like, F it all. I am done. I am done. I am checking out. I am done. And I finished the school year because I wasn't going to leave my children. So I finished the school year. I quit my job. At this point, my daughter had gotten enrolled into a residential treatment center, and she was scheduled to be there until she was 18. So I was she was no longer to be living with me. And then I assumed when she was 18, she'd want to go off on her own. So I got rid of my apartment. I got rid of all of my stuff. And it's actually showing up on my timeline right now, because it was like basically a year ago that this happened. Everything has been like, when you look at my life and you see like when things happen, you begin to really realize how powerful our lives are and how powerful our stories are. But all of this was lining up at this time. And I loaded everything I owned. So I moved into my friend's living room. All I had was my queen size mattress with a bunch of tubs under it of my clothes and anything that I wanted to keep. And I finished the school year by living in her living room. And I had no privacy other than a curtain hanging in her living. I was in her dining room, and it was open to the living room. And I just put up a little curtain, and this was my only privacy. And I was like, I am resetting everything. I quit my job. I had no other job lined up. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I just knew that I couldn't do what I was doing anymore. I had to be done. I had to be done. There was just no way I could keep living like this in this job that sucked now, because they had wanted me to teach social studies and make all this curriculum. I was stressed to the max, taking care of my daughter and her trauma and her issues. I myself had a lot of trauma that I was kind of unawares about at the time. I was a functioning adult. I had a job. I had a career. I had a degree. Who knew that underneath this was a very traumatized little girl struggling to understand the world, and attracting toxic relationships and behaving toxically. I mean, I behaved so poorly to my daughter because, again, I was perpetuating what I had learned from my father: controlling, manipulative, authoritarian, in power. And so I used all of those behaviors on my daughter because I thought that's what parents do. So this begins the time where I'm like, this was a year of evolution for me. This was a year of everything is changing at this point. And it was the ending of that relationship, the adoption of my daughter, the changing of the school, all of the skin issues, the stress issues, the cortisol issues, the high functioning anxiety, and it just boom. And I was like, I'm out. I'm done. I'm doing something different. So I minimalized everything, lived in my friend's living room until school ended. When school ended, I loaded up my car and I took a trip to my grandma's house. And I spent the summer honestly living like a teenager. I picked up my cousin in Montana. She was like 14. I took her to grandma's house with me. And I just had fun that summer. And that was the summer I turned 30. And I even had, what did I get that summer? Mosquito bite. I ended up getting meningitis, worst illness ever. I literally thought I was going to be disabled from that point because my brain could not function. I'm like, there's no way I can run a job or anything like that. But luckily that all cleared up. So that was my 30th year. And that really began the journey for me of, I'm going to do things different. And I took 6 months off of trying to date or meet a man or anything like that, because having ended that relationship with David in North Carolina, I was like, I can't do this again. I need to take some time for myself and figure me out. And I actually dressed in a way and presented myself in a way that made me look very unavailable to men, if you know what I'm saying. And I didn't want any sort of attention whatsoever. I just wanted to, focus on myself. And I began to think about, what do I want in a relationship? Now, during that time, I eventually found my job with a corporate company that began the Insurance Exam Queen. That's where I started teaching the insurance exam. And I was so good at what I was doing. They would fly me all around the country to different places. And it was such a fun experience being able to do that. I was living off of a corporate credit card. And I found myself, eventually I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to dip my toes back into the world of men again. And I ended up in a very, very beautiful relationship. Again, all private, because I just, for whatever, unless I'm marrying you, nobody knows about you. Like that. For some reason, that's just how I am. Although a little bit different with David now, because I don't have a ring. But if I keep talking about it, he tells me it makes it wait longer and longer. So anyway, I ended up in a very beautiful relationship with a man in part of my travels. And he was one of the first men that I had met that was, very gentle and very loving. And it was such a stark contrast between what I had grown up with and what I thought men were. And such a contrast between the men that I had dated when I was younger. And it began to really open my eyes that men could be better than my father, that men could be different. And so it was a 2-year long traveling relationship. We never made commitments to each other or anything like that, but I would come and visit, and we would just have this beautiful, weekend together here and there as I was traveling throughout the country, and it was wonderful. And there was a time where I thought maybe this could become a relationship, and we had a conversation about it, and it was just like, no, that's not ever going to happen. And I actually did I was sad about that, because I was like, well, it was such a beautiful relationship. I was like, it would be great if it was more. And it was like, it was not going to become more based on our life situations. And I remember explicitly a conversation with my sister and her boyfriend at the time, Jeff. And they had told me, they're like, Melissa, are you having a good time? Yes. Does he appreciate you? Yes. Do you need to stop seeing him just because it's not forever? And it was like, no. It's like, can you continue to enjoy time since you're having a good time? And it was a huge shift for me in terms of what I believed about relationships. That relationships can be about experiences and not about must be lifelong commitment or else it's over. And that was a big shift for me. And I really began to dig deep into my beliefs about relationships and how I saw men and what I believed, relationships had to be. So then my mind kind of expanded a lot more about, relationships. And throughout that time, I was also technically still dating, because I knew it wasn't going to be permanent with him. And so I was still, though, looking for a life partner. And I had multiple experiences of men who seemingly were everything that I wanted, and we would have a good time, and then they would ghost me. And it was happening a lot. And every time I would go, what is wrong with me? Why does this keep happening to me? There must be something wrong with me. And that, I think, is pretty normal. I think that we all kind of go through that, especially when, again, we're so traumatized with relationships and society that, we begin to really question ourselves and our worth when another person, and so much of my worth was attached to, what does a man think about me? And if a man thinks that I'm not worth a reply, if a man thinks that I'm easy to just let go of and drop, then I must not be very worthy. So I went on a journey of self-worth and loving myself and being at peace with myself. And while I was traveling around the country all those 4 years, I made significant improvements of how I felt about myself. I was a lot more comfortable with my body. I would go out to dinner alone by myself with my corporate credit card. I didn't feel like I had to be with someone else. And I really expanded my belief systems and really came back in tune with loving myself. Now, I wouldn't say I was fully in love with myself as much as I am today, but I was definitely in a significantly better place than I had been, and I had put a lot of time and effort into feeling more worthy on my own, unreliant of someone else, and I had put a lot of time into not being attached to every man that showed up thinking that this would be the one, and that if he left, then that would be the end of the world. And I just got to a point of accepting that, if they showed up and it was great and wonderful, but then they left, like, okay, then it's not for them, then I'll just, I'll meet someone else. And then COVID happened and we got into lockdown, and I was living with my sister at the time. And I eventually I wanted to be like, okay, we've stayed in lockdown and we're living in a house of like 6 people, I think. It was getting a little crazy. I felt like I was living with my parents for a little bit, because I was living with my sister and her husband. And I had an apartment in Vegas, but I never went there. And I certainly didn't want to go there at the beginning of the pandemic, because I'm like, what are we going to do? Is there going to be shooting in the streets? Like, what is happening? Is this the apocalypse? I didn't want to be alone. I'd rather stay with family. But after a few months into it, when we realized, it's not going to be like that, it's not going to be like The Walking Dead, then I decided to go to Vegas. So I had all these visions in my mind about what I was going to do now that I'm like, on my own, single, and I have all the time in the world to travel and do what I want, because I was a remote worker and I just worked on the computer wherever and whenever I needed to. So I saw myself, I love going outdoors. I love going on adventures. And I decided that when I got to Vegas, I would spend time exploring, going hiking, going to the lakes, going to the beaches, and not worrying if another person was with me. And I also had a big revelation that I had invested quite a bit of time in my sister's life, in that she was raising 3 children. I was super Auntie Melissa, and I would be, if she needed me, I was there. And I just invested a lot of time into her and her children. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means like that, but what it meant was I wasn't really investing time in myself and my relationship. So part of going to Vegas, because even when I was dating, or attempting to date during that time when I was traveling, it was like I could date while I'm traveling, but the reality of having an actual relationship when I'm traveling all the time was slim to none. And I was like, what location do I even date a person in? Do I, date them in Charlotte where I hang out with family? Do I date them in Vegas where I live? And so I wasn't putting, if being in a relationship was a priority to me, I wasn't in a situation of being able to make that happen. And I was more inclined to travel and hang out with my sister. So, and her kids, because I just love them so much. So I was like, you know what? It's time to invest in me and in what I want and the kind of life that I want, apart from my sister and her kids. And now that traveling has stopped, corporate traveling has stopped because of COVID, hanging out in Vegas is going to be a perfect time for me to get in tune with myself, to do what I love and enjoy. And, maybe I'll be able to find a partner. So I go to Vegas, and a couple of days after being there, I turn on my dating app. The very next morning, I wake up to a message from a guy who I absolutely loved. Like, he was so raw, so real in his message. And within 3 messages, we were going to be meeting each other for breakfast. And he ended up becoming my second husband. When we had our breakfast, we talked about everything. And this was the very beginning of a very epic trauma bond. So although I had done a lot of work on healing myself and loving myself, there was still more work to be done, because I was still attracting a person who would push the pain that I had, and I would push their pain, and we would cycle pain. So there was some self-worth happening and some self-love happening, but there was still epic amounts of trauma in my life that was going to come out with this partner. We had experienced very similar things. We both had a stepmother in our life who was evil in a way, the way that they treated us, the way they put us down. We both had, our parents' divorce, and there were both times in our life where we didn't get to really be with our biological mother. So we had a lot of similar pain. He also had some similar relationships like I had. And we just super bonded together. And we both said what kind of life we wanted. We wanted a life with a happy relationship and to, go on adventures. And he wanted to be famous in music. And I knew I wanted to be something big out there, but I didn't know exactly what. And so we just, we quickly trauma bonded. And it was within 3 days of meeting that we actually said we're getting married. And it was beautiful. I still, I don't regret anything. And everything that happened in perfect alignment of what needed to happen for me to become who I want to be. And it was during that relationship, and it was so wonderful at the beginning. And once we officially, though, got married, that's when trauma just blew up between the two of us. Because now we're living together, full on trauma all the time, showing up, because that's what relationships are, to wake us up and make us conscious and realize, we live so often in our thoughts. We spend more time thinking than we spend time in our actual reality. We spend more time being busy doing things than we take a breath and realize, oh my God, we are on this earth, this spinning rock. The sun is shining. We have fresh water to drink. We can just turn on our phone and watch creative art, a movie, and life is freaking wonderful. We have food available to us pretty much at any point, and we're not afraid of death or starvation here in America. We are so in our head all the time about all of our problems and all of our worries that we don't even realize how wonderful current life is. And it's often because of the trauma that we experience that detaches us from realizing how wonderful and beautiful and how magical the fact that we're here on this earth is. So in our relationships is where we really wake up, or we have the opportunity to wake up. And so trauma between my ex-husband and I. And it got to the point where so we got married in November. In February, I experienced a massive episode, breakdown. I don't even know what to call it. And I basically just lost my goddamn mind. And I started, and now I call it a spiritual awakening. And this is where I was in that transition phase of, because as every day, once we were married and our trauma begins to play out, and what I mean by that is we were fighting and arguing a lot. And our whole day could just be fighting and arguing with each other. And I was like, I have the same relationship I saw my father have. What? I don't want this. It was a little bit more loving. It was a little bit more, it wasn't as intense as what I saw with my parents. We were trying. We were through the fighting, we were trying to do better, but we just didn't know how to do better. And I was seeking how to do better. So I was reading books, I was doing energy work, I was trying my affirmations, I was trying meditation, I was trying visualizations, and trying to get out of this cycle that we were in. And again, I had this moment of where I really lost touch with reality. I started believing different things. I started seeing different things. And I ultimately thought we were in a video game. And there was a day, and there was also a lot of trauma, with my daughter and even with my second husband that had happened early on before we had gotten married. And she was scheduled to come out. And I didn't know what to do because the two of them, my ex-husband and my daughter, hated each other. and they didn't want to be around each other, but I needed to help her come to get some teeth work done, some dental work done. And he didn't want her to come, but I'm like, I have to help her. She's my kid. And I'm like, what am I going to do when the two of them see each other? Like, this is going to be nuts, you know? And that was when I just dipped out. I just dipped out of reality. And when I was driving to the airport to pick her up, the sign started changing, lights started changing. It was almost like I was on an acid trip or something. And I was driving through the airport, and it was like, this is a video game. Nothing matters. And I was crashing into gates because it didn't matter. I crashed. I thought there was a point where I found myself somewhere in a garage, and there was a big metal fence. And I had a belief that if I just hit it hard enough, I would actually go through it to the other side. And I believed that that's what I needed to do. And I did not crash through the other side, but I was like, oh, that was weird. Maybe I'm supposed to turn around. So then I turn around, and I'm driving somewhere else. And then there was a cab in front of me, and he wasn't moving. And then I had this belief that if I hit the cab, that I would become the cab and I would be in that car. And that car was better than my car. So I hit into the back of the cab driver. So I was crashing into gates, hitting cars, driving around the airport erratically, like insane. And there was even a police officer on a bike who tried to stop me. And my behavior at that point was so crazy. But I got back in I thought if I hit him, I would earn points or something. So I was ready to crash into him, and he's like, oh my God. And then he asked me to get out of the car, and then I'm like, I don't want this. I'm going to get back in the car. And he tried to give me water, and it was just a nightmare. And then I got back in my car, started driving around. So at this point, they're alerted to this crazy woman driving through the airport. I eventually park, and they all surround me. And I don't know where exactly my daughter is, but I try to tell her, you know, that I try to tell her where I'm at, and I'm just like laughing hysterically. I just think none of this matters. All of this is stupid. We get to reset, whatever. And I was just in a completely different state of mind. And I remember everything. Like, I remember all of it. I remember what I think. I remember why I was thinking that. I had a lot of racing thoughts. And even prior to leading up to that, I had a lot of crazy thoughts about my family, about different things. It was almost like my mind was jumping through like 20 different timelines and experiencing realities of different things and then trying to bring them all into one. I also believed that like we get reincarnated within this life into new people. And so there was a neighbor in our neighborhood, and I thought that he was all the versions of my father, because or all the father figures that I had experienced, because he kind of looked like my dad. He was reading a book that my father from Pine Haven used to read, and just there was different things about him that made me believe he was reincarnated versions of all my fathers in my life in this one man, and that he knew me, and he was waiting for me and expecting me. So I went up to him, said hello, I hugged him, like totally stranger guy, like doing all these things, and it got a little wild. And that was leading up to, you know, the accident where I went to the airport and went crazy. And this is why we have insurance, people, because insurance ended up paying for everything. Luckily, the damage was not too crazy at the airport. I was driving kind of slow, thank God. And but my point is I totally lost it. And that was the event, the trigger, like therapy must happen. Now, I had never really gone to official therapy before. I had tried different things. I was mostly doing like energy work and spiritual things, but I hadn't gone to like actual therapy before. And so I once the accident, once all of that happened at the airport and I came home, and I had also believed that my husband was part of some epic plan, and that he knew what was going on, and that he was he was putting me in this position to make all these things happen. And when I looked at him dead in the eye, like, what are you doing to me? And he's like, I seriously do not know what you're talking. Like, this is insane. And then the illusions that I had created began to crumble. And then I realized, oh my God, I just went crazy, and I'm back in reality, and none of the things I thought were real. And all the racing thoughts stopped. Everything stopped. All the illusions stopped. The belief system stopped. And he took me to a hospital, to do a CAT scan to see if I had a brain tumor, because my behavior changed so quick, so erratic, that it's possible that I had a brain tumor. They did a scan, they saw nothing. So then the next step was to take me to the psych ward, and I stayed there for 3 days, and I spent some time and it was like the best day of my life. I got all the food I wanted. I got to hang out how I wanted. I had no cell phone. I got to completely detach from everything. And I absolutely loved my stay there. And I came out of it, scheduled an appointment with the psychiatrist, got a therapy set up. And the psychiatrist basically diagnosed it as a brief psychotic episode with an obvious trigger. And the trigger was my daughter coming into town, and the two of them, there had been an epic battle before between my ex-husband and my daughter. And because we all are very traumatized individuals. And that was the trigger, was her coming back into town, and also having spent the last 3 months being married with a person where I'm finding myself fighting just like my parents used to fight. And it was like I couldn't live in that world anymore. Something had to change. And so I lost my goddamn mind. And so then I started going to therapy every week. And they also had wanted to put me on bipolar meds because it was possible that I had bipolarism. My father had it. And I didn't necessarily disagree or say no, because it could come, at whatever point in your life. And again, I believe that that's related to the trauma in your life. But we decided within my therapist that if this is bipolar, then I would like to see, before jumping on meds and taking that diagnosis and following that path, I would like to see if another episode pops up, right? Because the psychiatrist was more along the lines of, this was a one-time episode, a brief psychotic episode with an obvious trigger, than it was going to be a lifelong diagnosis. Because I didn't have a lot of the history of what a bipolar would look like. So with my therapist, we created a list of things. He's like, well, what behaviors did you have? Racing thoughts, TV was talking to me, believing that certain things. And we had a list of things that if I got into this path again, then we would begin to go down the bipolar path. But in the meantime, we would just do, regular therapy and stuff like that. So I started therapy, and I was going for a year. And it was in my therapy sessions that I really began to see the levels of trauma that I experienced as a child, and my basically desire to be in a toxic relationship because of how I was raised, and that I was my father's therapist. And so I saw now for the first time that I basically was in a marriage that was an attempt to do what my father raised me to do, which was to cater to a man, take care of his emotions, help him get better, and completely deny myself. So, and it was a struggle for me too, because when we got married, it was, we immediately took a vacation around the country. We immediately traveled. We got married on the beach. We did all the things that I had seen myself doing once I came to Vegas, and we began doing those things together. So I was like, oh my gosh, how wonderful. I had all these ideas to do all this adventure stuff, and I was willing to do it alone. But then I met this partner, and it was like the universe was like, hey, you're finally ready to stop, taking care of your sister's family and to now start taking care of your own family. And here's your family. It's ready to go. And here's your partner. And it all felt so good and right. And it was, because that is what I needed to evolve. Okay. So that relationship was everything I needed to be who I want to be today. So I have zero regrets for that relationship. But I was going through therapy, and here's where I learned, again, that I'm suppressing myself, suppressing my needs, suppressing my wants in order to cater to this person. Because what happened was, again, we were traveling, we were hanging out, we were doing all these things. But once we got married and we moved into our apartment, he never wanted to leave. He wanted to stay in his studio. He wanted to make music. He never wanted to come out of his room. And I was suddenly like, wait a minute, we were supposed to be traveling. We're supposed to do this adventuring. Like, what is going on? He didn't want to go out to eat. He didn't want to go anywhere. And through the course, and that's, part of what led me to losing my goddamn mind. So then it was through therapy that one of the biggest things that I picked up in therapy was that I need to live like, I wasn't trying to leave my husband or trying to end that relationship when I realized what it was, that it was a severe trauma bond. But and my thought process was, he stuck with me while I literally lost my goddamn mind. And I can stick with him as he's healing his own trauma. So then within our marriage, a lot of his trauma came up. He had a lot of trauma from his childhood that was hidden. He had a big secret that had been revealed when we were married that he now had to deal with within his family. And it was all a lot for him. And I was like, okay, like he has a lot of trauma. I have a lot of trauma. Like, we have a lot that we have to work through. I'm going to therapy. I asked him to go. I asked him and he started to go, but then he quit going. And I asked if we could go together. He didn't want to go together. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give him time and space so that he could, come to this healing journey of his own. I'm going to continue to heal. I'm going to continue to go to therapy. I'm going to continue to work on my traumas. And I'm going to, do what I need to do. And I actually started living by this motto that, I'm going to live like I'm single. And what that meant was I was going to stop waiting for him to leave his studio. And I was going to take myself to dinner just like I had thought, going to take myself out to find friends, going to take myself out for a venture and going to go start traveling again. And that's what I began to do. And it wasn't an attempt, again, to leave him. It was just an attempt to take care of myself and live my life without waiting for him to do his healing, without waiting for him to take me out to dinner, without waiting for him to want to travel. I was just going to do those things myself because all I could control was myself. All I could take care of was myself. So then, and we did have happy moments, right? Like it's not like our whole marriage was just like the worst thing ever. We did have a lot of trauma bonding fighting, a lot of repeat patterning from our past childhood. But, we had fun times together. A lot of times I would make lunch and we'd sit on the patio and the sun was beautiful. And what I would focus on was those moments. And those were the moments that showed up on Facebook. And so people thought we just had this really beautiful relationship. But it was because I know that the universe gives me what I'm constantly thinking about. And so if I'm thinking about that we had a great time on the patio, we had a great time on lunch, and so I'm going to take a picture of that, I'm going to enjoy that, I'm going to focus on that rather than focus on the fact that we spent all morning yelling and screaming at each other because our trauma bond is so crazy. I wasn't going to focus on that. I was going to focus on the goodness. And that's what I began to do constantly with my therapy too, was focus on the goodness, focus on the goodness, focus on the goodness. So, and I had already talked about this, what the final moment of us splitting up. Oh, and I talked about this too before. A year after my breakdown, so that was in February, I had gone to therapy for a year every week after that. And so the following year, we had scheduled a trip, and this would have been like one of our first trips actually getting out of the house and doing something. Like, again, we had traveled all around the country when we first got together, and I thought that was going to be our life. And we ended up being at home all the time because he didn't want to leave and he had his own trauma. But after a year of therapy of myself, and, I was like, hey, let's start going out again. Let's explore, and he was open to it. So I had scheduled this trip for us to go to Colorado, and last minute he wasn't going to come. But I had to go because I had made a commitment to watch somebody's dog in exchange to stay at their place. So I couldn't cancel the trip either. And it was during that trip that we had talked on the phone, and I had expressed to him that I missed him, that I wished he was there. It was not an attempt to blame him or be upset at him. It was to just share my feelings with him, that I had missed him and I wished we could have hung out. And I understand that he, had his anxiety and that's why he didn't want to go. But it was still, just sad for me that he wasn't there and we didn't get to hang out together. It wasn't, again, I just wanted him to comfort me. I wanted him to say, I love you too, honey. I miss you too. Our life won't always be like this. We will be able to go out. We will have some fun. Just, I need more time, whatever. Like, I wasn't trying to blame him or be mad at him or shame him or anything like that. I just, as a human being, wanted to express my feelings of sadness and to receive some comfort in return. He took that conversation as blaming and shaming, and he decided that, well, he told me, he's like, we got into this huge argument, and he's like, I'm gonna leave. And we were arguing the entire night, or I was trying to like, whatever I had said about me being sad had set him off so drastically that I was trying to get him to come back and trying to get him to understand what I was seeing and trying to get him to understand my perspective. We were on the phone all night long. I'm crying my eyes out. I'm not getting any sleep whatsoever. And then the next morning, I've got to wake up and I've got to drive back to Vegas, a 12-hour trip through the mountains with absolutely no sleep. And we are still going at it. I'm still trying to fix whatever I had just caused within him. And then he tells me that he's going to be gone by the time I get home, that he's not going to live there anymore. We're over. We're done. And although I had been to therapy for a year, I still was deeply dependent upon our relationship because relationships are so important. I was still deeply dependent upon being his therapist at this point and trying to take care of him and trying to fix him just like my father has raised me to do with him. So when he said he was leaving, and this was like the first time he threatened, I'm going to leave, this is over. It was like end of the world for me. I hadn't gotten to that point yet of I'm going to live single. This actually happened after that moment. And so I wanted to kind of come back to that moment, that there was this pinnacle experience in our relationship where I attempted to express my feelings of sadness, seeking comfort, and he absolutely could not hold the space. He absolutely could not be there for me in any way, and in fact took it as an attack upon him and used it as a reason to say this relationship is over and he's going to leave me. And I was not fully strong enough yet. I was not in a place yet to be able to hear that. And so I, again, was like going to lose my freaking mind. And I had no sleep, and I'm driving through the mountains, and my thoughts are racing constantly about what does this mean? My relationship is ending. Our marriage is over. What does this make me look like? I told everybody we fell in love in 3 days and got married, and now this is ending. I felt a lot of embarrassment. I felt a lot of shame. I felt a lot of guilt. I felt all kinds of things just pouring out of me. And when he told me he was going to leave, I was like, please don't leave. Please don't leave. Please don't leave, And I was basically I was driving, but I was like fetal position on the floor crying. And I ended up saying something to him like, just don't leave until I get there. And he's like, why not? And I'm like, because I don't know what I'm going to do. And he took that as me threatening suicide, that if he left, I would threaten suicide. And that wasn't it's not that I wasn't thinking that. Like, of course I was like, oh my God, I could just drive off the road right now and just be done with this. I could just end all this pain now if I just drive off the road. But it's not like I wanted to do that. I knew that my thoughts were racing. I knew that this was pain. And again, but I had no sleep whatsoever. And the things that were coming out of my mouth were not awesome. And so he took it as this huge threat that I was making him stay in the relationship. Otherwise I would kill myself. And when I actually pulled over, I took a nap before I got back to driving again. And I immediately sent him a text like, hey, I'm sorry. You can do whatever you need. If you need to leave, you can leave. That's fine. I'm on my way home. I'll be fine. I'm not, in a space that I'm not going to be hurting myself, and I never even said those words. I never said that. I just said, I don't know. He's like, why is it? And I was like, I don't even want to go there. Right. I don't even want to go there about the thoughts about just driving off the road, So, and I think that's a normal thought to have when you're going through what I was going through. So anyway, after my nap, I had told him, I'm like, do whatever you got to do. I'll be all right. And I worked on switching gears. I started turning on some music. I started singing. I tried to do anything to distract myself from the crazy thought patterns of shaming, blaming, and all these things about relationship. So then when I got home, I went to therapy, and I told all of this to my therapist. And that's really when I got to a point is like, I never want to find myself in that position again because of a relationship. I want to be strong in my own emotions. I want to be okay no matter what someone else is doing in my life or not. What do I need to do? And that's when we came to, the self-love and the self-worth and the self-care. And that's when we really developed the idea of, I'm going to live like I'm single, and I'm going to take care of myself, and I'm not going to rely on this man to hang out with me or to do anything with me. So then for about a year in the last year of our relationship, it really turned a lot more into like roommates. We lived together, and I would cook us food and all the things. And I was giving him the space to do his healing, and I was working on my healing. And one of the things that our relationship had lacked was sexual intimacy. And for me, that's very important. I have no shame in that. I like such sexual intimacy. I like being touched by another human being. I like feeling desired. I like to desire someone else. I like to have fun. And there was none of that happening within our relationship. And I knew a big chunk of that was because of his own past trauma that he had experienced. So, and we had talked about having an open relationship before. I mean, he was a sex worker, so he was, engaging in these activities, but I was not. And he's like, well, that's my job. It's not the same. And I'm like, I get it, but you're also getting to do those things. I'm not getting to do those things with anybody, so he made a huge argument about that. And then he also felt really, so then he was like, well, you can date. And so then he's like, you can go see other people, and you can go, get your sexual stuff somewhere else. So I was like, okay, cool, no problem. But when I tried to go do that, he didn't like it. So then he started creating all these rules, and it became harder and harder for me to be able to experience that, because he kept creating new and new rules, things that, he's like, well, it has to be like this. It has to be like that. I have to meet them. You have to date them for a long time, and then you can be allowed to be sexual. And I didn't want to date anybody else. I didn't want to know somebody for 3 months and then have a whole blown relationship with them. I just wanted the sex piece, And I tried his way. It just wasn't functioning. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, I understand that you have trauma. I understand that these rules would make you feel comfortable, but while you're dealing with this, I am missing out on a need that I have, on a want that I have. And it is only your fear of being inadequate. It is only your trauma that is, and I have tried, but it is not functioning. And so I'm going to go and do this my way. And my way was meeting partners that I had in the past, that I knew we had no desire to be in a relationship, but that we could have fun together in a sexual way. And that it was safe. How much it was be so much harder to find somebody to date in Vegas than to just go to a person I already knew I trusted, I already knew was safe, I already knew we could have what I was the sexual intimacy that I was looking for. But he didn't want me to go back to a former person. And that was one of his rules that he had come up with. And I tried to not do that for a while. But again, it just, no matter what every rule of his that I followed, another rule would pop up. And it got to a point where I was like, okay, we've tried it your way. It's not working. You and I have no sexual connection or intimacy here within this marriage. And I'm willing to give you time and space to do the healing that you need. I'm not trying to break up with you or leave you, but I am trying to get my needs taken care of. And it's much more safe and effective for me to go back to a prior partner that we've had this type of relationship before. So I'm going to go see them. And that for him was the switch. So he decided that I was going against his consent and that I was committing adultery. and that was reason for him to leave me and end the marriage. So he packed his bags and he moved out. And he wanted me to change my mind. He wanted me to say, I won't go see this person. And I just was unwilling to change my mind or to say anything else. I said, I'm not changing my relationship with you. I still want to be married to you. I still want us to work on our relationship. But I'm not going to continue to try and cater to all of your trauma and your rules and not have my own needs met. And so I wasn't going to change my mind. So that was what caused him to pack his bags and leave. Now, that was the best thing. Absolutely the best thing. And absolutely did I appreciate that he decided, because if he wasn't going to be at my level of healing himself and taking care of himself and having the same level of self-care and having the same level of self-love that I had developed through therapy, if he wasn't willing to do that, then if him going out the door, I was like, okay, like no problem. But I still experienced like a grieving process, right? Because I had spent years of not being, I spent years of being single, wanting a partner. I finally meet a partner, their epic love story. Within 3 days, we were proposed, and now it's all ending. And I was okay with it. I didn't beg him to stay. I didn't beg him to leave. I didn't change my mind. I was firm on my stance, and he chose to leave. But I did experience sadness of what I thought could be. I experienced sadness of, well, now I got to go back out there again, you know, and dating can be hard. You know, there's a lot of things that come with that. But what I ultimately chose to do and what I ultimately chose to feel was gratitude. Instead of being heartbroken, instead of, you know, beating myself up for what I could have done different, or even shouldn't have married him in the first place. You know, I avoided all of those thoughts. And I was like, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for what I experienced. I'm so grateful we had to have that fun love at the beginning. I'm so grateful that this relationship has alerted to me to all the levels of trauma that I've had. I'm so grateful that it caused me to go to therapy, and then I've been doing therapy for a year. I'm so grateful that I became more of me. If you look at pictures of me leading up to our relationship and then throughout the relationship, that's when I began to really find myself. Seeing his love for me reflected back to me, and he encouraged every way that I wanted to be. If I wanted to wear, you know, fun earrings, he was like, wear them. I wanted to have crazy hair, have crazy hair. Like he didn't try to change anything about what I look like, and in fact just encouraged me, express yourself, express yourself, express yourself. And I look like a completely different person from when we started dating to who I look like today. And I developed my own sense of style, my own way of being myself. I no longer cared about what other people thought I should dress or look like. I just focus on what I want to dress and look like, what makes me happy. And that came via my second marriage. And so I just focus on, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for this experience I had. I'm so grateful for the time that we had together. I'm so grateful for what I got to learn. And I'm so grateful that I got closer in alignment with what it is that I wanted, because I didn't want the relationship that we had. And by him leaving, it allowed me to be open to the relationship that I did want to have. And I didn't have this huge like pain that I used to have at the ending of a relationship, because even when I was in awful relationships before, I still suffered when they ended, because I was like, oh, we could have had this and we could have had that, and it could have been like this and it could have been like that. And instead of feeling those things, I just opened myself up to whatever was going to come next. And I didn't hold on to anything. And I didn't linger in sadness. And I didn't linger in the pain. And I didn't linger in the what ifs and the should haves and the could haves. I didn't shame myself for quickly getting married. I didn't blame myself for falling in love with someone that he ended up not being who he presented himself to be. I took no shame, no blame from that relationship, and I walked away with just immense gratitude. And then I go out into the world, living my life, having the funnest of times. That summer, so he left in May, and I just continued to do what I was doing. I had already been living single for a while. Like I had said, I developed that in therapy. So I just continued to do that. I continued to take myself out. I continued to have a good time. I continued to travel. And that summer was amazing. I spent so much time at the beach. I just had a wonderful time. And it was in August, shortly after my birthday, that my now David partner and I had a phone call. And it was, again, just mad. My skin was tingling when we started talking on the phone. And I actually went live right after our phone call. I'm going to be so excited to listen to it a year later. It's going to be in August 11th, I'm pretty sure. Our phone call was just so wonderful, and our relationship has been just magical. Like, again, growing up with my father, I had no idea what a happy, loving relationship looked like. No idea. No idea what that looked like. And what was normal to me was toxic, screaming, yelling, mad at each other, blaming each other. That's what I was used to. That's what was normal to me. And it was through my second marriage that I made the shift of what was okay with me in a relationship and what I wanted from a relationship. And that was not what I wanted. And it was through that relationship that I got to see, this isn't what I want. Like, this is what I was attracting because I wanted, I was in this program in the condition to attract a man who needed a therapist. And that's exactly the relationship I landed in. So I was able to break that belief system. I was able to rewire my brain. And I was able to get in much better alignment with the kind of relationship that I wanted. And now I'm in a relationship. We literally wake up happy. We go to bed happy. We're giggling all the time. We're laughing all the time. We can communicate about anything. There's not anything I can't tell him. There's not anything we can't talk about. One of the things I love, and what we did it last night, is we groom each other. We'll just spend hours taking care of each other's body like little monkeys. Like, I just love it. Like, there is nothing hidden from him. And I get to see all of him, and he gets to see all of me. And when I'm having sadness, right, one of the biggest moments when in the ending of my second marriage was I expressed sadness to him and he threatened to leave. I wanted to share my real feelings with him about how I felt, and he threatened to leave. And now I had moments of sadness, and David just holds me and he just hugs me, and he lets this tornado of sadness move through my body while he provides this love and comfort and this safety. And when it's over, I'm able to be like, oh my God, like, this person witnessed my feelings and he loved me through it all. And he's still here for me, and he didn't take it personal, and he's not using it as a reason to shame me or diminish me or to anything. He just loves me and holds me through all of it. And I've never felt so safe. I've never felt so supportive. I've never been in a relationship where we just wake up so happy. We just wake up so happy. In my second marriage, he was so grumpy in the mornings. I couldn't touch him. I couldn't even look at him. And it wasn't until I gave him coffee that he would kind of like begin to wake up. We never really cuddled in bed. We never really had sweet moments, on the pillow or anything like that, and pillow talk or whatever that is. And now I have it every single day of my life. I mean, we will spend, the whole day together, and then we'll go in bed, and we're just so excited to talk to each other that we'll just talk to each other. We giggle with each other. We end up in these massive giggle fits where we can't even breathe because we're laughing so hard. And this is every day of my life. We've had moments, like, we've definitely have had, I think I think maybe like 2 or 3 arguments where it got a little heated. Where in my other relationship it was like 2 or 3 an hour, like 2 or 3 a day, you know. And now it's like it literally is less than one hand, less than 5 fingers, right? Like I can count on one hand the times that we actually maybe like yelled at each other, you know. And I think that you know, it's not just, you know, we people are human, we have emotions, but it's not our normal way of functioning. It was based off of, you know, a crazy situation, or just, you know, one of us was in a mood that day or something like that. You know, it's not our normal way of functioning. Our normal way of functioning is laughing, is giggling, is affection, is love, is kindness, is gentleness. And that is our relationship. And it is worlds apart from what I had before. And I think one of the biggest things was I was so willing to let go of what I had in that toxic relationship that wasn't serving me anymore. And I was so willing to be open to whatever could happen. I was like, and again, I just immense gratitude. The amount of gratitude I felt at the ending of my second marriage propelled me into my third relation. I think we're getting married at some point. I mean, we're pregnant together. But my partnership that I have now, I mean, being able to let go of what I had, to be open to what I could receive, and then receiving the most magical, wonderful, loving, kind, gentle, sweet, hilarious relationship that I have now. Like, oh my gosh. Like, how often are we so caught up on the ending of a relationship that we can't even see straight? That all we think about is, what did I do wrong? And all it says that no one's ever going to love me. And I'm just so ugly. And no one will ever want to be with me. And this was my last opportunity. And oh my God. Like, how often do we cling so hard to the ending of a relationship that it just becomes like a cloud that just soaks us up in this sadness and this like dread. And it's like, the willingness to let it go, the willingness to have non-attachment, the willingness to be grateful, This is one of the things my sister had talked about in one of her lives, where she talked about relationships, was people will leave a relationship or it'll break up and all they felt is that they wasted time. That because the relationship didn't stay, because the relationship ended, they wasted time. I didn't feel like 1 minute of my life was wasted in my second marriage. In fact, I felt every minute was an investment towards what I wanted. Every minute was an investment towards what I wanted. And it showed me what I wanted. It showed me what was available to me. Because I learned to really deeply love myself. I learned to have the gratitude, and I learned to be open to what was possible. And it's absolutely magic. And I firmly believe that's why we got our baby so quick. Like, when you look at the timeline with David and I, at third David, I've been talking about David a lot, but I try to say ex-husband and David, but they're all named David. When you look at my current relationship with David and our timeline, and this is another thing too, is if I blamed myself or shamed myself for how quickly I got together with my second husband, so many people, you should have taken time, and if you would have taken time, then you wouldn't have been in this situation. I'm like, well, I love the situation I was in. I loved what I learned. I loved what I experienced. I have no shame or blame for that. So when you look at my current relationship, we met in August. We were pregnant by the end of October. And so we've actually been together pregnant longer than not pregnant. And and but it's like, instead of thinking of it as like, oh my god, they're moving too fast or whatever the things, I see it as an epic timeline jump of finally getting to the kind of life I wanted. Right? I'm finally in the kind of life I want. A loving, happy partner who loves and adores me in every way. I mean, there was a day where I forget exactly what was said or something, but I was disappointed by something. And he was like, oh, he's like, I can't stand it. He's like, I hate when you're disappointed. He's like, it kills me. And he's like, I do everything to, I never want to see you disappointed. I only ever want to see you smile. And to have a man be so moved by my facial expression of disappointment that it just, he's like, it destroys me to see you disappointed, because all I want is for your happiness. And it was just like, oh my God, like for a man, that's what providing is. That's what providing is a man who just wants to give you the goddamn world in the most happiest way. And he does every single day. Every day he shows up for me so much. Like yesterday, I used to be a kind of person who would just do everything myself, because in past relationships, they never did anything. Like I had to do everything. I did everything. And David is a similar way where he'll do everything, but like he doesn't stop. Like, and he's not like, why aren't you doing this? He just does. He sees the task and he does it. He sees what needs to be done and he does it. It's not this, it was such a battle in my second marriage for him to help me with the dishes. And I even apologized to my therapist the other day. I was like, we spent so much of therapy time talking about freaking dishes and how I needed my ex-husband to help me do dishes and he didn't want to help me do dishes. And if I were to ask David right now for something, he would jump to do it. I mean, there's times where he's like, I'm tired or whatever, but I'm saying if it needs to be done, he's on it. And a lot of the times he's on it before I even say anything. And he just does what needs to be done. And he's a freaking workhorse until it's done. And it's like, I'm with a man who's actually a freaking man who wants to support and take care of his woman, who wants to do things for her, who wants to see her happy and smiling and not, I'm too lazy to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to get out of my chair. Like, that's not the kind of relationship I want. And I got to learn that. I got to learn that I wanted a partner who's going to get up with me. I want a partner who's going to do things with me. I want a partner who's going to do life with me. I want a partner who can just help me. Like, I love making breakfast together. Like, we'll get into the kitchen and he'll make coffee and I'll make breakfast, and I could be doing something and I'll turn around for a minute and then I turn around back and he's flipping the bacon and he's taking care of things. Like, we're so in sync with what we've got going on. And it's just so freaking amazing. And it's nothing I had ever seen. Nothing I had ever seen in my younger years in terms of a relationship, except maybe on TV. Right? I had no example of that. I only had examples of controlling, manipulation, screaming and yelling, and just toxic, 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 toxic. So, of course, that's what I ended up being in the types of relationships. We do what we saw. And I was in toxic relationship after toxic relationship after toxic relationship. And when I was ready to go to therapy, when I was ready to work on realizing all this trauma I had, when I was ready to face that trauma, when I was ready to speak my truth, when I was ready to heal from those things, when I was ready to shift my thoughts, when I was ready to let go of expectations I had about relationships, I found the most magic. It found me. He came to me. He was watching my YouTube channel, studying for the insurance exam, and he came to me. I didn't do any work, which really reminds me of like the feminineness. When you think about the feminine, she is an egg just waiting for her suitor to show up. She does no work. She does no effort. She just, I'm here, come to me, show up to me. And it's the male that's got to do the work. He's got to do the swimming. He's got to do the pumping. He's got to do the work to get, and he is dead set on getting to that egg. He is dead set on getting there. And when you really relax into your feminine energy, it is the man who will show up to you. And it was so cool. I saw this comment the other day that said, "Don't date like a single woman, date like a wife who's ready to be in her role." Something like that. It was an amazing post. And that's exactly how I showed up with David. Was when we met for the first time, because of he lived there and I lived there. I lived we were different places. We booked an Airbnb so that we could spend a few days together and, see what this was going to become. And I did what I wanted to do as a wife. I bought the food. I did the cooking. I kept it clean. Like I was like, this is how I want to live. I rubbed his shoulders after we had food. I didn't want to date him in a restaurant because that's not our lifestyle. That's not the life we had. I stepped immediately into the role that I wanted to be as a wife, as a lifelong partner. I didn't date him like a single woman, desperate and hungry for a man. I dated him as the wife I want, that I am, that I'm ready to be when you're ready to, step up. And it's just, again, it's just so cool. Like, I was just like, I'm here. If you're ready, you could come to me. And that is such like the female. And then when you think about the male, so like, women, quit working so goddamn hard to try and get into a relationship. You don't need to work that hard. You just need to be beautiful and epic. And when I say beautiful, I mean just be yourself. Be yourself. I'm here. Let the man do the work to come to you. Just do you. Take care of you, boo. And allow them to come, because that is the role they actually want. That is the hunter in them. They are seeking to come to you. When you try to hound on them, they don't like it. They're like, it's too easy. I don't like this, So anyway, completely different shift. Where I was a year ago, 2 years ago, really, versus where I am today, totally different timeline, totally different situation. I spent years thinking I'll never have a kid, a baby, because I just could never meet a man who would be worthy and capable enough to be in a relationship with me and to take care of me and to support me in the way that I wanted. And now I have that, I feel like, times a million with him. Like, I am so incredibly happy about the partner that I have, how we live together, how he shows up. Every day I just turn to him, I hold his hand, and I'm like, I'm so in love with our life. I'm so in love with our life. And he's like, I love our life. Like, I love our life. And we're like, oh my God, we love our life. We just have the best life. We just love our life. And that is how we live every single day. And it is so freaking magical. So much more. I feel like this ended up being more about a summary of what I've experienced rather than what I wanted to really talk about love. So I might need to come on here again. Although I did express how we got to be grateful for whatever experiences we have. We can't allow the ending of a relationship to tear us down. We've got to look forward with happy expectation of what is possible. That any relationship we had that ended is helping us get more in alignment with what we do and don't want. And when we can let that go with appreciation, we're able to move forward into the next best thing. And that's what I want people to walk away with. So I'm going to let y'all go. It's been an hour and a half. Oh my gosh, I've been talking that long. So I'm going to let y'all go. You have an amazing day, and I send you all the love. And you're not alone. This is a tough world to be in, but look at the sun shining. Look at the fresh water you get to drink. Spend more time being in the present moment than in your head, and life begins to just unwind in the most beautiful way. So I love you all. Have an amazing day.